I have great news for people who struggle with the habit of beating up small knitted boys. I found a solution. Fighting games have been around for, 4 decades? It's one of the biggest genres out there. Street Fighter, Tekken, Fatal Fury, Mortal Kombat for people with anger issues. Between home consoles and arcades, there's been no shortage of good fighting games. And crossover fighters are a popular subgenre of fighting games, intertwining characters from all kinds of different series. That includes games like Marvel vs. Capcom, Injustice, and Mortal Kombat vs. DC. And a lot of them really feel like love letters to every franchise that's included in them. Plus, if you're not into fighting games, which to be honest I never really have been for a variety of reasons I'll get into later, seeing a character from a series you care about among others in a game like this can motivate you to give one a shot. Once a developer, studio, or general brand has enough characters, I think a crossover fighter is definitely in the cards, and frankly, I'm surprised PlayStation didn't jump on that train sooner. PlayStation has so many franchises under its belt, which you may find hard to believe nowadays because they don't... You know what? No, this joke's been run into the ground. It took them a while, but it began to be heavily rumored that they would be finally making that crossover in 2011 with the name Title Fight being thrown around. That was a tentative title, of course. The game eventually evolved to be known as PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale by the time it was formally announced in mid-2012. Starting dev in 2009, Battle Royale was developed by Superbot Entertainment, formerly known as Broadworks, as their debut title, and they did such a good job with it that the team decided that it couldn't be topped, so they never made a game again. All-Stars is a fighting game. I would be concerned if you didn't pick up that much from context clues. However, it isn't one in the same vein as the fighting games I mentioned before. This is a platform fighter. The stages allow for highly increased mobility, and rather than emptying a health bar, have different rule sets. In the case of All-Stars, decimating your opponents with a special attack. It kinda reminds me of Smash Bros. 1 minute 53 seconds. Hey, that's a new record. If it wasn't already obvious, PS All-Stars was heavily inspired by Nintendo's Super Smash Bros., not only one of the biggest crossover fighters, but one of the biggest fighting games in general. I've never been into regular fighting games in part due to controls. I'm not good at memorizing combos, and I feel like no matter what I do, I'm always doing something wrong, and the screen largely staying static is just, not my thing. Now, I may not be into traditional fighting games, but Smash Bros. I can get behind. I'm still not the best at it, but the increased mobility, super satisfying combat, visual effects, music, and of course massive cast of characters from games that you either love or at least tolerate makes it hands down my favorite way to fight. In 2012, the latest entry in the Smash series was Brawl from 2008, which experimented a tad bit with including characters from franchises outside of Nintendo's repertoire, namely Sonic and Solid Snake. In other words, Smash Bros. Hadn't reached the full-on crossover between every video game ever made status it sits at today. In that regard, I would say it made perfect sense for Sony to give it a shot with their massive cast of characters going back nearly 20 years. After a few open and closed betas, a delay from October to November 2012, and a robot chicken sketch, okay, sure. Yes, All-Stars released for the PS3 and PS Vita on November 20th, 2012 because the week wasn't f***ed enough. I've known of this game for ages, but never played it or knew much about its gameplay, but I saw it in a GameStar one day and said, you know what, f*** it. I've developed an appreciation for a ton of the series represented here as well as for platform fighters, so I think this game could be right up my alley. Is the game good? Are the comparisons to Smash Bros. Warranted? Will I start playing the game and stop asking myself questions? No. Will the game make me breakfast? Before I take a look at the game itself, there is something pretty cool about just buying the game. Whether physical or digital or on PS Vita or PS3, a copy of PS All-Stars also earned you a voucher for a copy of the game on the opposite console, since Sony was pushing their cross-buy program back then, with some of their games releasing on both platforms. It wasn't tied to your PSN account either, so if you wanted to give your code to a friend who had the opposite console, you could. All my homies love consumer-friendly practices. As you would expect, this no longer works for physical copies of the game, but it will still work for digital versions. This is an immensely cool feature. It would be nice if PlayStation at least brought this back for your own account for the PlayStation games on PC. We open with a CGI cutscene featuring the song Finale by Medeon. I don't respect people who don't know who Medeon is.
PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale!
Oh, nice to see you too. On the opposite end of the consumer-friendly spectrum is this. In the early 2010s, game companies really wanted people to crack down on buying used games because we need more money. Our cross-buy program was a mistake. This was before you had to pay to play online with PS Plus. To deter people from buying used games, most games came with these little inserts containing a PS Store code which you had to redeem to use the games online, and if you bought a used game, you would risk said code not working. If your code was used, you would then have to pay $10 to use online features. Perhaps that was a sign of things to come, but I would still consider it highway robbery. These tactics were eventually phased out by the mid-2010s, since A, you had to pay to play online to begin with now, and B, it was a fucking stupid idea. The code that came with my game is either used, expired, or set not to work after the server shut down for this game, so this pop-up is eternally on the title screen whenever I boot the game. The PS All-Stars online service shut down in 2019, but they never made it so that this pop-up doesn't appear after that, it's just stuck like this. And what's even worse is that this game has trophies tied to online multiplayer, meaning it's now impossible to legitimately platinum this game. It's a shame since I really don't think this would be a hard platinum otherwise. I managed to get most of the other trophies in my own playtime. If I ever publish a game on PlayStation, remind me not to lock trophies behind online services. When you start the game for the first time, you're thrown into a tutorial, because this is a video game and that's how video games work. We can move around and jump with the X button, which took some getting used to. I kept pressing up to jump out of habit from... This is its own game. This is its own game. This is its own game. Our basic attacks are mapped to the triangle, circle, and square buttons, with each having variations depending on what direction you hold when you press them. Pretty standard fighting game fare. Grabs are mapped to the right stick, blocking and rolling uses R1, and taunts are L2. I like this control scheme. It's pretty easy to pick up and figure out, which I feel is a benefit of platform fighters. You know, PaRappa's creator didn't like that he was in a game with weapons. Okay, you know what? I have to break the comparison restriction for a sec. It's just kind of funny to see some of these characters cross over since PlayStation has a far more mature lineup than Nintendo and their characters in Smash. Like, yes, I know, for his neutral special he wields a gun, but it's just kind of out of left field to see Nathan Drake fucking open fire on Sackboy. Finally, you're super. By beating up other players, you collect AP since for whatever reason College Board sponsored this game. When you fill your AP gauge to the max, you can use a special, which there are 3 for each character, depending on how many times you fill the bar. The third of which acts as a final acts generally as the most powerful of the bunch and mostly guarantees eliminating all of the other players. You also get AP faster by knocking it out of other players with grabs, using certain attacks, or by using items which spawn on the stage. Landing a special on an opponent results in a kill and you gaining a point. You can either go for whoever gets the most kills under a time limit or for stocks. This is a cool system, and I do enjoy how the specials are implemented. Most characters have some pretty fun ones too. And yet it is far from a perfect system. I'll touch more on that later. The game also supports arcade sticks, which is cool, but I doubt many people actually took advantage of this, and if you did, I don't care. The base game for PS All-Stars has a roster of 20 characters, all of which are unlocked from the start. We got the following: Kratos, PaRappa, Fat Princess, Sweet Tooth Radek, Sly Cooper, Nathan Drake, Cole McGrath, Evil Cole McGrath, Ratchet, Jack, Big Daddy, Dante, specifically Dante from Devil May Cry 2013, or as I like to call him, White Dante, Heihachi, Noriko, Raiden, Sackboy, Sir Daniel, Spike, and Toro Innuendo. This is a fairly strong roster of PlayStation characters. They've got a pretty good balance of more casual and hardcore characters, characters from more well-known and slightly more obscure series. Where the hell is Crash? Where's Spyro? Where the fuck is Lara Croft? They are missing some seriously important PlayStation characters. And like, yes, okay, Crash and Spyro had been multi-platform for years by 2012, and Tomb Raider was on Sega Saturn and PC from the start. But I mean, come on, these are PlayStation characters. Actually, that most definitely isn't the reason they're not here. Devil May Cry is also multi-platform. It's also a bit lame to just stick with one character from each franchise, with Cole and Evil Cole being the sole exception. I'm gonna be blunt, I don't know the significance of Evil Cole. I haven't played Infamous yet, I'll get to it eventually, I promise. But that feels like a wasted slot, man. I guarantee it was only added to have an even 20. It would have been cool to see more characters from some of these franchises, like throw in Sully alongside Nathan Drake, Lammy alongside PaRappa. Of course, games don't have unlimited budgets, especially a studio's first game, so I'm not gonna act like some of the roster limitations were a deliberate choice, but f*** you, I'm still disappointed. I feel like some of the characters really should have been cut in favor of others, like Fat Princess, really? It's still a fine roster overall. It could have been better, but it could have been a whole lot worse, and 20 isn't a terrible number of characters. Also, this PaRappa design ain't it. I understand they had to make him semi-3D because otherwise you would just be looking at this during matches, but no. But like the roster as a whole, it could have been worse, my lord. Jumping into a versus match, the gameplay feels good, linking together your attacks feels natural, and everything feels nice and smooth. Usually for games like this, I tend to play with items off. It's just how I've learned to play them. But in the case of All-Stars, I deliberately play with them on. That's because picking one up and using it significantly increases the amount of AP landing attacks gives you. I find the base AP building is far too slow. Granted, in a versus match you can adjust the speed to your liking, but only for versus matches. The movesets for each character feel well crafted to fit their character, my favorite ones to play being Dante and Kratos. Their specials are also decent, and some are fairly unique, but this is where I'm going to bring up some of my problems with them. The balance is just all over the place. With some level 1 specials, you're most likely going to get just one kill. With other characters, it's easy to get multiple. Some characters' level 3s will immediately wipe out all 3 other players guaranteed, but others won't instantly do so and instead let you wipe out everyone individually, which gives you the opportunity to do so multiple times. And it's so easy to do so, you're essentially guaranteed 6 kills. For some characters, it's not even worth charging the level 3. PaRappa, for example, his level 3 special will instantly kill all other players. His level 2 doesn't, but it's so easy to just roll into the other players with it that I'm pretty much guaranteed 3 kills anyway. So why should I bother charging the level 3? A lot of the specials are also clearly built for a 4-player match. For many characters, there's pretty much no reason to charge past level 1. You also can't use your specials in mid-air, which is kind of irritating, and missing your attack means having to charge all the way up again. I'm not as opposed to the latter though, since it really just means you having to be a bit more strategic with your attacks. That being said, it is easy enough to miss with some specials, so you'll have to recharge a lot, which I did. It's one of the 2 reasons I don't respect myself. I know I just bitched a lot, but trust me, I really do like this system. It's a good idea, I just think it needs polish. If they balanced the powers of the different level 3 specials and gave you more reason to charge up, it would be a lot better, but as it stands, it works. And by the way, yes, these are kills. Spike, the 10-year-old protagonist from Ape Escape, is being fucking slaughtered. The stages are alright. I don't particularly love any of them, and most of them have very few stage hazards or interactive elements. The gimmick with them is that halfway through the battle, the stage changes in a way that it crosses over with another franchise. So, like, Sandover Village becomes a Hot Shots golf course. There are no Hot Shots golf characters playable, but there is representation in this form, sure. I guess I would say my favorite stage is Little Big Planet, since it's pretty interesting to begin with a constantly changing stage, but then, at the end, it becomes a buzz quiz where you have to answer a question correctly. Waiter, more fun stage gimmicks please. I wish there were at least a couple more stages though. If they were going to include Hot Shots Golf Rep through stage form only, they could have done the same for a few other franchises. The arcade mode of All-Stars is the primary single-player campaign. It involves you picking one of the characters and then going through a series of fights with them. Boy, do I have some things to say here. So each campaign is bookended by 2 cutscenes made up of still images showing the character you're playing as and perhaps a few others from their series. The first is usually them discovering the legend of AP, and the latter, which you see after finishing their campaign, is them using it. The cutscenes are made up entirely of still images, which is kinda lame, but they do have the original voice actors reprising their roles in all of them, at least as far as I can tell. Most cutscenes are like, sort of stylized to represent the franchise, but not really. The images themselves are well painted, though from the look of it I think they've been traced over 3D models, which isn't a fault per se, it's just sometimes you can kinda tell. Some of the frames are also just, like, what are we doing here? Some of the cutscenes are pretty neat actually. PaRappas are modeled after the obscure PaRappa anime of all things, which I'm not even sure was available online when this game was in development. Actually, one of his DLC costumes references it too, I was not expecting that.
I need help. The kind only people like me can provide. I've heard of some sort of activity. A gathering of a special group of people. Conduits? Good? Bad? I won't know until I find them. But I know I have to find them. Have to do what I can to bring them back with me, to help me save this city.
He's gonna recruit their help by killing them. Once you work through most of the battles, there's a cutscene of your character interacting with their assigned rival character, and honestly, this might be the best part of the game. I love these interactions, they're funny, they paired up a fat princess with evil fucking Cole. Also, for some reason, the rest of the game is 60 FPS and these cutscenes exclusively are 30. Alright. You kill them, and then you fight the final boss, Polygon Man, who was a very early spokesperson for the PS1 from the 90s who was eventually cut for being too menacing. That is a really cool reference. It reminds me of how the final boss of Astro's Playroom on the PS5 is the PS1 dinosaur tech demo. Now the content of the campaign itself is fucking garbage. Okay, it's not that the gameplay itself is bad, because it isn't. It's pretty fun, it's satisfying. The issue is how the campaign itself is structured. It is literally the exact same thing for each of the 20 characters. There are 0 changes in progression for any of them. You will repeat yourself time after time after time. You always start with a 1-on-1 match with items turned off in the dojo stage, and then a 3-player match with items turned off, and then a 4-player match with items on, and then another 4-player match with items on, and then a 4-player match which is first to 3 kills wins, and then another 4-player match which is first to 3 kills wins. And then you fight the rival character, and then you fight Polygon Man, which isn't that interesting or challenging of a fight, and when you beat him, he says, "How could this happen? None have beaten me until now," which isn't f***ing true because I've already beaten the campaign with like 10 characters. And that's it. Rinse and repeat for 20 characters. It takes you like 30 minutes per character to do this. It will take you 10 plus hours to complete all the campaigns. I understand the limited budget thing, I do, but is this really the best they could do? They couldn't spice it up with a little more variety, more gimmicks for the stages, different layouts of rules? It doesn't help that my disc was being stupid and would do this thing where I would play through one campaign, then start a second one, and then the game would soft lock after the second battle. This happened this exact way consistently like 5 times over.
It's not doing anything. Why is it not doing anything? You gotta be f***ing kidding me, man.
Outside of a PSN trophy, you don't get anything meaningful for completing the campaigns, and as far as I know, you don't get anything for completing all of them, but I do not have the energy to check. You don't get anything for completing all the campaigns. I think this is a detriment of having all the characters unlocked from the start. Like, what if by beating each character's rival character, you unlocked them? That would give the arcade mode a lot more purpose and make it feel less like a waste of time. I mean, there are unlocks in the game. Each character has a level, and by winning battles you level them up. Getting to higher levels unlocks new taunts, intro animations, one alternate costume. These are neat, but they don't feel meaningful at all. I'm not motivated to unlock all of Raiden's animations, because why should I? Who cares? There are also combat trials, which sound like they could be pretty unique and fun. No. Most of these are pretty much just tutorials. Not to say they don't occasionally throw in a unique idea, but a good amount of them are just use all your attacks, use this specific attack, and taunt 10 times. Outside of the standard arcade and versus modes and the combat trials, nope, that's pretty much everything. All there really is in terms of detail and history on all the characters or their franchises is a menu showing bios for each of them, their game, and year of origin. You know what? I'm gonna start comparing. For what should be a celebration of PlayStation franchises, this feels exceptionally lame. I'm not expecting something like the masterpieces from Smash Brawl and 4, but at least a trophy equivalent would have been nice. The presentation just isn't there. I mean, every stage only has one song, the general presentation is pretty generic, albeit I do like the motive of the PS3 menu lines. There just isn't much pizzazz. I think that's one of the biggest problems with All-Stars. There just isn't much here. You can fight, you can play the story mode, which again is pretty much the same thing repeated 20 times over, and you can do some of the challenges, but there isn't anything deep enough to really want me to keep coming back. This wasn't a budget game. It released at $60, more than games most similar to it, and has far less content than them. Now granted, a bit after launch it did drop to a far more reasonable $40, and nowadays it rots on the PS Store for $9.99, but still, at launch, for what you got, $60 was far too much, not to mention the costly DLC on top of that. Oh, the DLC. 4 DLC characters were released post-launch in addition to the 20 in the base game. That includes Emmett Graves, Cat from Gravity Rush, Isaac Clarke, and Zeus. All good picks, and another great reminder that I need to play Gravity Rush. There's not really much else to say about them. I'm glad they're here, even though again I wish we had some more classic PlayStation characters. Also, even if you don't own them, the DLC characters will sometimes appear as opponents in the arcade mode, and like, okay, I get that the characters have to be in the files even when you don't have them to make online multiplayer with them work, but it's just kind of funny to me. It's like the game is teasing you. In addition to the characters themselves, alternate costumes for the characters were also released, and Jesus. You only get one alternate costume for each character in the base game, and from there you can buy more for $1 to $2 each. That's kind of a lot for what you get. I feel like these costumes should have just been included in the base game. I don't get why they're DLC. It's not like a few $2 costumes breaks the bank or anything, but just, like, You don't even get all 4 costumes for a DLC character when you buy them. You have to spend additional $4 to get the other 2. Why? Again, this game launched at $60. I feel like the player should be allowed more than one alt costume in the base game. But hey, if you want to get all the DLC at once at a slightly reduced price, you can get this $50 pack that contains all of it and released in 2017, 5 years after release for some reason. As I mentioned earlier, All Stars launched simultaneously on PS3 and PS Vita, and for completionist's sake, I decided to check out the Vita version. This port was developed by Bluepoint Games. Going in, I wasn't expecting much. I figured it would be at half the frame rate and would just be kinda mid. But no, I was really impressed. This really is just the PS3 game, but now at a much smaller form factor. It runs at 60 FPS and plays just fine. There are a couple of small differences though. The menu has been reworked with much larger buttons, which is a welcome change for the PS Vita's tiny screen, although I don't agree with all the decisions they made. Like, why is a standard versus match marked Wi-Fi when you can just do a regular AI fight? Weird. And the only big difference with fighting is that, since we only have L1 and R1, specials are now mapped to R1 instead of R2, and to pick up an item, you use the touch screen. That completely takes you out of the action. Why not just use up on the D-pad or something? It isn't mapped to anything. I didn't notice any significant issues though. This is an extremely solid port, and it's impressive that it launched alongside the PS3 version. I suppose I do have one gripe in something that really isn't the fault of the game or port itself, and that's that for a game like this, I'm really going to want to play it on at least a slightly bigger screen. For a zoomed out platform fighter, I would prefer something that's at least like Switch 1 screen sized, which the Vita just can't compare to. Also, something I didn't think about is that if you get All-Stars digitally, you won't get that annoying online play pop-up since the online pass is just included now. And technically, you could platinum the Vita version of the game through ad hoc multiplayer. Nice work, Bluepoint. I hope your studio lasts at least another 15 years from this game's release. As it stands, PlayStation All-Stars never really went anywhere. Battle Royale was the only entry in the series. What do you mean there's a mobile game? Oh my god. PlayStation All-Stars Island is a free mobile game released exclusively in Europe in 2013. There's a very low joke to be made here. Despite it being released in Europe only, I found a way. I found another way. Yeah, this game isn't good. It's basically just a compilation of 4 endless runner games, and none of them are particularly good. Uncharted's Temple Run, Little Big Planet's Karting, Infamous is like kinda neat, I guess. And the best one is probably the Gravity Rush one, but that's still not saying much. I played it like twice and have no desire to ever again. Also, I don't know if you noticed, but there's a chance that Coke played a hand in funding this game. All of the runners involve collecting drops of Coke Zero, the impossible made possible. By filling up a bottle of Coke Zero, you don't know Zero till you've tried it, you get to play a little minigame. Man, what do you want me to say? All the characters look like they drank dishwater. They should have drank Coke Zero.
No, I don't drink. This is just some Coke Zero.
PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale is a very imperfect game. It has some good ideas, but balance issues and less than stellar design does weigh it down. But as much as I hate the lackluster single-player mode and find the roster somewhat disappointing, I still think Battle Royale is a good enough time that has some great callbacks to the source material where it counts, and overall decent gameplay. I would never put this over Smash Bros, but maybe, just maybe from time to time, I'll pop it in. It's like a 7 out of 10. But now could be a great time for PlayStation to revisit All-Stars. Platform fighters are fairly common now between Multiverses, Brawlhalla, Nick All-Star Brawl even. And they're far less often seen as just Smash Bros ripoffs. It's just a different genre of fighting game. In the past 14 years, yes, this game is 14 years old, get over it, a lot of new PlayStation characters have been introduced that could be added. Throw in Alloy, Jin Sakai, Astrobot, Joel, hell, why not Spider-Man? Not to mention the countless exclusions from the original that could finally see the light of day. I'm talking Vibri, Lara Croft, Crash, Spyro, Mr. Driller, hell, why not Monokuma? He debuted on a PlayStation console. And listen, I know there's already one in Smash, but we really do need a Final Fantasy VII rep in here. Make a proper Subspace Emissary-esque story mode with more interactions between the characters. It doesn't have to be a massive 30-hour-long campaign, just something that delves further into one of the best parts of All-Stars and isn't ass like PlayStation Move Heroes. Add new modes outside of standard fighting, add a greater variety of stages with more dynamic elements, throw in some new gameplay mechanics. I know PlayStation just did a big sort of crossover game with Astrobot, but in my mind there's a sizable difference between a robot dressed up like Cat from Gravity Rush and Cat from Gravity Rush. It could be a great time, and I think there would very much still be a market for it. And maybe this time they could advertise Minute Maid